Well, welcome to another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful podcast. I'm your host, Josh Dietrich, and today, physically in the house, is my good friend, Mr. Kyle Miller. How are you, brother?
Doing great, Josh. Thanks for having me this morning.
Dude, of course. Kyle Miller, we've met not even maybe 2-3 months ago.
Yeah, it's gone fast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
Got a chance to hang out 4 or 5 times now.
And we went right into where are you, who are you, what's your story, and
We hit the ground running getting coffee that one morning.
for sure we
That
did.
was good.
That was good. I love that, man. So let me introduce you as a husband, a father, 2 boys, lives in Elk River, Minnesota, not too far from here. We connected to really just talk about life and business and the intersection of both. But I think the reality as a fellow believer, you're in the trenches and in the current path professionally, moving into your own thing, which is awesome. And for anyone that knows, I love entrepreneurs, and especially when we come back from eras of really great employers that built great businesses we get to learn from, and then take the chance on our own to go out into the world and do that. So why don't you tell us about yourself, the construction world in the professional sense that you're doing, and then we'll kind of unpack your personal world as well. So how long you been in the business world, and did you start right away in construction, or what was your path to getting to a point now of HOA construction and focusing on the path that you're on right now?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and to tell my story on this platform, Josh. And glory to God for us being here together.
Amen.
And for the abundance of opportunity and love in this room, and for your audience. I'm incredibly grateful for all of that. And going into the remodeling piece, I grew up helping my dad fix rental properties. That was my introduction to trades, you could say. Not the most enjoyable work. It was demoing and building back flip houses, and that was when I was a child up to about 15 years old, and then typical high school jobs. And then I was in my early 20s. I was in college. I was working at a restaurant and felt something missing. I didn't have a clear direction on this is the college degree and career path I wanted to go. But I started to become skeptical of the education system. And I'm like, okay, if I want to be a doctor or a lawyer or one of these other vocations, I need a degree. I don't need a college degree to be successful. And I started to look at things from a different perspective, and I didn't end up finishing my college degree, which is okay, right? A lot of successful entrepreneurs don't, and that's okay, because I wasn't aspiring to be a doctor or a lawyer or something that
100%.
requires those specific
100%.
credentials. I had a friend whose dad had a startup manufacturing company, and I had spent, 3-4 years in the restaurant business at this point, like bartending and waiting tables, and I was charismatic and good at talking to people and knew I wanted to do something in sales. So my friend Adam, I got his dad's number. Joe, great guy, one of the hardest workers I've ever met, man. This guy is so laser focused on growing his business. I just called him up. I'm like, hey, Joe, Adam's friend. I think I'd met him once or twice. I can't remember, but I'm interested in a sales role at your company. Excuse me. And he's like, that sounds good. Let's do a 2-week thing. You can ride along with me. We'll see how you like it, and we'll go from there. Well, so I did these ride-alongs with him, and we went to service some of his accounts. This was a manufacturing company that serviced different, like, printing and manufacturing companies that, like, printing companies, they have all these rollers, huge rollers in their printing presses, and his company took these and remanufactured them. And then there's these printing and manufacturing companies everywhere that have these products in them that his business can serve. And so after that end of that, it only took a week. He's like, Kyle, I want to hire you full time. Do you want a full time gig? And I'm like, absolutely. So I took that opportunity to join a startup company. I think his business was only a few months old at that point. He had a manufacturing plant, and he had his plant workers, doing the products. He needed someone in sales to help grow,
Totally.
service existing accounts, and help grow the business. So I dove headfirst into that. After I don't know how long it took. Several months went by. I stopped working at the restaurant, and I was just full-time doing sales for this startup manufacturing company. So going out there and doing the typical sales thing, like prospecting, cold calling, setting up meetings, getting to know the pain points of the customers and how can we align solutions to those, and really learning that sales cycle. And I helped him for 2.5 years grow that business. And then in the background, I should say now, leading up to me leaving there, I had heard of All Around, and All Around is a great, well-branded construction company here in the Twin Cities. And there was one or two guys that got involved with that business early on. They weren't the founder, but they were, I don't know, one of the first few that helped start this company and grow it. And I became familiar with their branding through social media. And I'm like, okay, I like remodeling. I like the home improvement industry. I'm good at sales. I'm going to reach out to this guy I know and see if there's any opportunities, because I was looking for a change at that point. Right. I saw some writing on the wall with Joe's company, and I was just looking for a change. And Joe's company, I believe, is still doing well, so there was no falling out there. It just happened to be things worked out with All Around where I met with them and interviewed, and they gave me a job offer. And then I went to Joe and I said, hey, dude, I'm going to put my 2 weeks in because this is really what I want to go do, But I was incredibly grateful, and that was a good separation. I did 2 weeks there and then went to work at All Around. And All Around for the past 10 years leading up to this spring is where I really grew into the professional that I am today in the home improvement industry. And All Around is a very interesting business. I'll give you the short version, but they were established back in 2008, where the home collapse happened, and they grew very quickly as a rehab contractor and had accounts like Wells Fargo and Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac just rehabbing foreclosures. Yeah. Like All Around was one of the fastest growing companies in the state and in the country. That these plaques from like Fast 50 and Forbes 500 and stuff, and they did really well. And then Charles, to his credit, the owner, the founder of this business, he saw some changes happening, and they needed to get into like just the home improvement remodeling business and insulate themselves from the bank and the mortgage companies. So when I joined there, that was kind of when that shift was starting to happen. They wanted more people to help grow the remodeling sales side of the business, and they were starting to thin the herd of project coordinators that were servicing all the bank accounts, right? So and that's because the amount of foreclosures were starting to dry up, and the home market was getting stronger and stronger, turning around, right? You probably remember all this. For sure. And they did a really good job at growing as a remodeling contractor, growing one side of the business as the other side of the business was getting smaller and dwindling down. And that's kind of right when I got involved about a decade ago. And at the same time, we made a decision, this is probably about a year in, made a decision just to become focused on what they were really good at, which was exterior work. And because if you look at remodeling, or I guess any business from that standpoint, there may be like Amazon, and might be an exception, right? But if you look at most industries, people become the best by becoming a niche company or becoming focused on a few little pieces of the market. And that's what All Around did. And they became one of the best in the business for like roofing, siding, windows, an exterior construction company. And now it's insane. We can talk about this later. The amount of startups and roofing companies are nowadays. It's kind of like realtors. You can almost laugh at it, like everyone knows a roofer. But All Around was exceptional because their ability to adapt and see changes in the market, and really, really good at branding. To this day, they still might be the highest rated contractor in the state. Almost 1,000 Google reviews and a 5-star rating. And I spent 10 years alongside the owner, serving on a leadership team, helping with marketing and marketing strategy and sales, and always trying to look at things from a company perspective. So, and I don't know why, it was just ingrained in me. So when I started there, was like, great, I'm doing sales. I'm going to learn this and take what I know, and we're going to do sales and we're going to crush it and all that. But at every turn, I was looking at how can we improve this business, right? And that's just how I always looked at it. And it earned me a spot on their leadership team within a couple of years of working there. We we started EOS and made a leadership team. And I was one of those first 6 people on the leadership team all the way until I left the company this spring. And through that time there, I did extremely high volume sales, and at the same time helping with marketing, serving on the leadership team, wore a number of hats, but it was always, my main focus was always sales, right? So it was huge for the company and their growth to have me in that sales role. And then a few years ago, about 3 years ago, we identified as an exterior construction company in the market. We were very, very strong on the residential side. And the beautiful thing about this business is they were strong on retail. So like a homeowner, just they have money saved up, or they're using a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, or whatever means financing to make an improvement to their home. That's retail business. And then there's the insurance restoration side, which most people are familiar with. Bam, we get hit with a hailstorm.
Yep.
You need somebody who's familiar with that process of hail restoration, storm damage restoration, to help the homeowner through the insurance process. That's a different process, and all around was great at doing both. So I learned to do both very, very well. And there's a piece of the business that we were kind of lacking, and that was on improving multifamily buildings, right? Bigger opportunities, 6 and 7 figure, projects versus a lot of 10 to 20 to 30 to $50,000 projects. And all of our competitors has a staff that's just dedicated to doing that piece of the market. So we looked at it, and I willingly took on that role with the company to help grow that side of the business. So I had, by this point in time, like I was producing all of my own, or vast majority of my own business, right? So in sales, you have, depending on what sector you're in, you have companies that provide leads, and the salespeople go and work those leads, and then you have people that are producers. They go and they create and they drum up their own business, and I was producing most of my own business, and I gave up all of those relationships to other salespeople in the company so that I could grow this new thing.
Yeah, moving into the commercial, larger ticket space.
Yep. Yeah, and the primary influencers there are property management, community association managers, call them CAMs, community association managers, individuals in the property management industry, and they have a portfolio of townhome associations that they manage. And on average, a community manager might have anywhere from 6 to 20 associations that they actively manage in some capacity. They work with the boards of directors of those associations on making decisions and making sure the money is going into the right account and being spent on the right things, and all the things that the property managers do. And one of their primary roles is identifying what needs to be done for building maintenance, for projects, large improvements, down to the small maintenance items. And for 3 years, I grew the business there, developing and strengthening relationships, mostly with community association managers, and then some other strategic business partners that sent us referrals in the commercial space, like condominiums, senior living facilities, things like that aren't townhome associations, but they're commercial properties, bigger buildings. And what we called it commercial buildings with residential-like properties. So you look at your house, we got asphalt shingles, Anderson windows maybe, and siding products. It's not like a Quick Trip or a Walmart type of construction, right? And
so they call that commercial multifamily.
Commercial/multifamily, right? And commercial has its own technical terms in Minnesota, but you just call it commercial like you're dealing with a different type of B2B business relationship, which is what I did in the past, and I was very good at that. And even before I took this new role at the company, I had sold a good amount of those types of projects, right? And not only did I volunteer to kind of step into this role, but I was the best first person for that role at that time. So I did that, gave up all my relationships, started over for the second time in my career, like basically was something brand new. And basically 2.5, 3 years into it, going into this spring, I was really, because it's relationship-based work, right? It's farming. You can get some quick hits and sell some huge jobs, but to really grow that year after year successful recurring business pipeline. It involves a lot of business relationships, which I cultivated over the course of several years. And this spring, it was like really kind of taken off. You know what I mean? I already had a lot of sales in the books, and I had a lot of things cooking. And at the same, still doing leadership duties and things like that. But that was my focus there, was growing this department. And actually, one of my customers, they reached out one day, and they're like, "Hey, are you?" It's kind of out of left field. They're like, "Are you happy there? Would you ever consider leaving there and jumping ship?" And I'm like, "Honestly, no. Like, I'm really loyal to this company. They've been really good to me. I'm comfortable." Maybe that's the key word there, comfortable. It's part of the reason I left, right? Everything's great, but whatever. People have kind of headhunted me in the past. Not like I was just this massive talent, but when you make a name for yourself, people ask if you want to come work for them, right? So, but I never really entertained those offers in the past, and something about this one felt different because I did have some hangups there, like whatever. The owners there could probably say the same thing. Like, there was something that just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And it's not anything I can blame them or myself. It was just like we couldn't get on the same page with like my future at the company, and I was, to my own detriment, like kind of hung up on what the future looked like there instead of just trusting in the process. But I wasn't exactly like, I wasn't okay with the direction things were going. And so I entertained this offer to come work for this other company. And basically, when I was through this interview process, I wasn't interested in making a lateral shift. Right. I was making really good money. I was happy. Like, the culture all around was great. I felt valued there for the most part. They did some things that I think were kind of crappy. But to me personally, that kind of hurt my feelings, you could say, for better or for worse. It's like men have feelings, right? But those are small potatoes. I have to take ownership and responsibility for everything that happened. And, so this new company gave me an offer I couldn't refuse, right? It was a way to advance my career in a very meaningful way. And I went to sit down with the owners at the other company, the one I was working for, and told them about the job offer. And basically, they weren't willing to move the needle at all for one reason or another.
To keep you, right?
Right. To keep me there. And so I said, okay, I'm going to accept this other offer, but I want to leave her on good terms and have an opportunity to go through my entire pipeline and do things the right way. Like, I have a ton of jobs, right? And all have all these details. And, they didn't give me the opportunity to do that, and whatever. I wasn't in their position. I can't knock them for not allowing me to do that, right? It's like, as a business owner, I respect them and the decision they made. They showed me the door that day, right?
Wow.
No, you're not going to be able to go through your pipeline. We've dealt with this before. They treated me like, because I was on the leadership team, and I've been, probably a dozen times in the past, gone through the process of the leadership team making a decision to fire someone, right?
Yep.
That's how I felt going out the door. Like, once I made the decision to leave there, it was like, boom, the same process as if they're firing somebody, which really hurt, right? Because there's relationships, like people I worked with there for 10 years, and I didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to them. They're like, "We don't want to make any noise or stir anything up around here. Just go pack your stuff, come back. Man. We'll have a check for you." I'm like, this really sucks. And I left there really upset for other reasons we don't have to get into, but basically I had changed my phone number. I didn't want to talk smack. I wanted to take the high road because I would have had customers calling me on this vacation I was going on. And I wanted to take the high road because I left there very upset, and I would have started talking smack, and which wasn't the right thing to do, because they're not bad people and they're not a bad company, right? I would have let my emotions get the best of me. So I changed my phone number, went on this awesome road trip with my family, which I had planned for a year, and I was planning on starting this new job when I got back from my Arizona road trip. And I got back and I met with the new company. I was going to start with the new company in a week. And I was meeting with the gentleman there, talking about the layout of my new office. And I said, I made a couple comments that offended people there, and they rescinded the job offer. And yeah, so I'm going to advance my career. I'm doing really well at all around, and I decided to leave there to advance my career at a place I'm instantly going to be making more money. in a potentially higher position, although maybe lateral there, but I was tied directly to the success of this company, the overall revenue, kind of almost sitting in like a partner position right away there. And their code of conduct was more strict than what I was used to. At the other company, there wasn't really much that I could say that would really get me into trouble per se. I kept it clean, but also the culture was a little different. But it felt the same when I went there, and I just like I was comfortable but excited at the same time, and just got into the wrong headspace and said something that was kind of like guy humor.
Yeah,
what I mean?
Off the cuff, just kind
somebody
of being funny,
overheard
right?
it, and it they reported it to the HR, and
Oh man.
and then also on my way out the door, I had asked somebody about the onboarding process, and I was openly critical of DEI policies, right? And that's a different discussion that we don't have to get into, but those two comments were enough for that company to basically see the writing on this wall. Like, we're hiring this guy to be a leader in our company, and he said these controversial things before he even started. So I can't hold that against them either. You know what I mean? Although I don't agree with it, I take responsibility for what I said, and it was a harsh correction from God. And I have to believe it's the Lord working in my life, because I feel like these things just don't happen by chance. Like, it took the right timing and circumstances to draw me out of this comfortable, lucrative career I was in to go to this other place where I was going to be making more money, making bigger decisions, advancing my career, to then like screw it up. You're left with nothing now, no job. And thankfully, we have enough money in savings and investments to pay our bills for a long time. And I was in this place where I don't need to go look for a job, and I don't want to go ask for my job back at the other company. I could have done both. I could have gotten a job right away. I could have gone and worked for another construction company. I could have gone back to all around, and the Lord led me to, this is the time to go into business for yourself, which that was in March, right? I finally made that decision and filed my articles of incorporation at the end of March. And so I'm taking my 10 years of high volume sales, marketing, leadership, and I wasn't involved with the old company with the production side of things, but I know enough to be able to run my business in a meaningful way, know the production side of things to get by until I can get somebody in that seat to take on that role. And that's basically what led me to starting this company. But I didn't want to be like everyone else. There's thousands, like I said before, their construction roofing companies are like, they're like realtors, everyone knows one nowadays, and it's this low cost of entry and this low hanging fruit, and insurance restoration work is super profitable. And I didn't want to be like all those people. And I decided to name my business and my core focus to be HOA associations, because that's what I did for the past 3 years. And I developed some very meaningful relationships that wanted to continue to do business with me. And that's the area in which I wanted to serve and become hyper-focused and develop my niche within. Just one, because I like that environment. I like the business-to-business environment, not always business direct-to-consumer or homeowner. And I wanted to be a little bit different than all of the other companies in town who do commercial, residential, insurance, retail. Like they kind of do it all, right? Yep. I want to be focused on a smaller, not necessarily smaller, but a more focused niche of the market, and that's townhome associations, condos, churches. Co-ops are like senior living facilities, things like that. Those sorts of businesses, and I like those transactions and those relationships because it's a group environment. I can come and work with a board of directors or a church council, and that's the type of environment in which I like to conduct business. Really come in and be a trusted advisor during that process. And so far, it's been what you'd expect. You're starting a business the first couple of months, and it's been a lot of admin heavy type work, getting everything, the foundations built. And I tell you what, a lot of prayer, dude. I try so hard to just I look up every morning and I still fall short. It's like I still find myself sinning. It's not like I'm not going and conducting business like at the bar, or like doing that type of sin is not what I'm talking about. But it's just this, like, I'm just this wretched, decrepit man trying to make my way through this world type of sin, right? Where you just get caught up in these silly behaviors, and it's just crazy. It's this beautiful mess of God forming me, continuing to form me into a better man, right? And it didn't start, but that harsh correction of, dude, you got to clean up your language. You know what I mean? You got to be careful of what you say and when you say it, because your words are so powerful. They're so important. And that's before we were, all there was the word. God spoke us into existence. And the more I mature and the more I grow, the more I realize how important words are. And that was just the harshest and most meaningful correction I'd ever had in my life, was losing that opportunity because of something that I said. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And it's something that I carry with me now that has helped me grow as a man, and it will help me continue to conduct business in a way that is pleasing to God and foundational to how we carry ourselves, right?
Yeah, for
things
sure.
that you say.
Dude, it's so crazy when I just hear your story, right? And thinking about unpacking that 12 years being a professional sales individual, right? 2.5 years at a startup where you're cutting your teeth, learning how to prospect and bring customers in and get them through the process, the pipeline, shifting gears, moving into a new industry, learning a new trade, learning about now bigger scale leadership, team development, building out people, developing people, creating strategy, right? And as opposed to just being a guy with a job, you're now looking after maybe a little larger team or responsibility. And how cool. I mean, how cool to look back and see that and what it was preparing you for. But then the lesson that along the way, right? So now you kind of see this pattern of, God, what do you have for me next? He calls you into this area, and then you've done well. The company's asked you to start a new division. You're going at that brand new from scratch, nothing that's you're unfamiliar with now, right? To build a book, you're being prepared for what he has for you, right? And so through that journey, you are kind of learning about yourself, starting from scratch. You're loyal, and the timing to transition might have made sense. And so the door opened to check out a new opportunity. Pretty normal after that period of time, hustling and grinding. It's incredible. But then having a circumstance such as that in an instant completely change your perspective and the opportunity that was right in front of you to be taken away, for you to be left going, I did not see that coming, and now I have to do something about it, right? So what were your options at the time? How long did it take you from, this is dumb, this is bad, this shouldn't have happened, this isn't me, right? To, I have to go get a job, to, I don't want to get a new job, I'm going to start my own thing. How long did that process take you? Because I think not all the time do we get forced into these situations. This is in our lives, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 times we kind of dealt with a big surprise, right? Generally speaking.
Yeah, to this magnitude, yeah.
To this magnitude, right? So what was that time frame between I'm coming back from vacation, I'm ready to start, so we just, as quickly as you can think of it, a month? That decision to process? I mean, a couple weeks for you to say, I'm not going to go back and work for the man?
Well, it happened probably within 3 to 5 days, maybe a week. So I'm trying to replay this back in my mind. I get the email on a Wednesday, so it was a Monday when I went in there to talk about my office space, and then I said those offensive things, and then on the Wednesday I received the email, but I didn't look at the email till like a Thursday afternoon, and then I reached out. I tried calling there were two to three guys that I was working directly with, the GM of the construction company I was going to go work with. But they serve on a greater leadership team that's part of like 5 or 6 companies, and kind of answer to them, right? Even though this guy makes decisions on for his construction company, and he has autonomy over that, but they also answer to like a leadership team.
Yeah, there's a little bigger company at play. Yeah.
Yeah. So I reached out to these guys to try to figure out what is going on. But during that time, because they didn't get back to me right away, I had time to self-reflect. I'm like, okay, this is probably what I said that led to this, right? So when I did finally get on the phone with him, what was a Saturday? It may have been Friday, Saturday morning. I'm
So
like
4 or 5 days later that day.
Yeah, 4 days later, I talked. Well, this is kind of like I'm working on closure here, potentially, potentially reconciliation.
Right,
period. Right. Excuse me. So there was a few days, and I finally got on the phone with the two guys that I was working primarily with on this opportunity and starting there. And I'm like, hey, before we even talk, like, I think I know what I said, and here are the few things, and then they confirm, and they're like, yeah, they talked about their code of conduct, whatever, and I'm like, this doing my best to recover, right? Because that isn't who I am as a person, but then again, it's like your words are a reflection of your heart, right? So it's like that was part of that awakening from God. It's like, dude, you have to, this is a transformational change, right? Because the things that come out of your mouth are a reflection of your character and your heart. And so, I was trying to recover, and I sent them a really nice email kind of addressing the points and what I said. And they're like, okay, we'll take this back to the leadership team. And then I think by Monday or Tuesday the following week, may have been Wednesday. So about a week, there was about a week there, but where I was in limbo, just waiting to hear back from them, whether they were going to still hire me
Were you on vacation at this point?
No, this was after vacation.
You got back.
Yeah. So I got the offer to advance my career at a new company. I put my
notice.
I resigned from the previous company. And then I went on vacation for about a month, a road trip, right? When I got back, there was 2 weeks where I wanted to kind of finish out that job pipeline. I told the guys at my old job, you don't have to pay me while I'm gone. I'm just going to go. When I come back, I'm going to go through every single job. I'll field work phone calls and whatever, act business as usual while I'm gone, right? But then when I get back, we'll go through this transition period of going through all my jobs, make sure that everything's done the right way, call all my previous contacts, give them the warm and fuzzies, do that clean handoff. But they let me go before I went on vacation, right? So clean break there, go on vacation,
came back vacation
expecting to start the new job. I meet with these guys right away. That's when I messed it up. And about a week goes by where I'm, 4 or 5 days where I'm in limbo, just like waiting to hear back. Am I still going to go work there or not? And then they get back to me and they're like, no, we're going to stick, we stuck with this decision. But so during that phone call, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to go do. I appreciate, and I was appreciative to them. I was like, I might go into business for myself.
So like, you got the follow up, right? A week later, and say we finalized our decision, and say we're not going to bring you on board.
Correct.
At that point, you'd already kind of been wondering, okay, what am I going to do if this doesn't work out?
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, I probably will have to just go do this on my own if this doesn't work out. Were you in a way sort of saying, you know what? That's what I have to do. It's probably what I'll end up doing. Kind of at that moment, you think?
For the most, yeah, that was the direction that I felt my heart going. And the nice thing is when I said that to these guys that I might go into business for myself, they're like, if you do, let us know, because we still want to collaborate with you. These guys still wanted to do business with me. It was just like, I said some dumb things that were, like I said, it was kind of guy humor stuff. It wasn't this massively offensive. It was just enough for them.
Enough locker room talk to say, you know what?
Yeah.
So, wow. So then, so you get off the call and it's solidified. Okay. At that point, you tell your wife right away. And what is she thinking? She had known this had happened, but she didn't know necessarily exactly what. I'm sure what you thought had happened, you'd shared with her, but she hadn't heard the official news. So you get off the call, and between now talking with her and then deciding to go after your own thing was what period of time?
Yeah, maybe another week or so went by. Probably prayer, just trying to do homework, market research, things like that, determine the feasibility of it. Looking at, I had talked to you about my my neighbor and some other people I know in the industry that
Right.
I could potentially not go into business with, but go work
partner
for,
with
go
somehow,
work with,
right?
some sort of partnership, things like that. So bounce around all these ideas, but I knew I wanted to go into this multifamily niche that I've been doing for the past few years. And it probably was only a week, probably less, that I decided I wanted to go into business for myself, because there was no better time, right? I don't have a job. I don't work for anyone right now, right? And we have
slate.
we have enough money just between our checking and savings to pay bills for 9 months, right? And then we have some in the brokerage account that could extend that if we need to, and then we got to cover some startup costs, right? Between a company vehicle and some other startup expenses, I'm in it for $25,000, and we can afford to absorb those costs and pay our bills for a while I try to earn customers.
And she was supportive of this, so she was,
for the most part, yeah. I mean, I think any of the guys out there listening, your audience is probably mostly men at this point, with similar life stories and some commonalities with us. And I think most of us can understand, like, women need security, and this was as much of a tailspin as it sent me for it. I think it affected her even more, because my wife has been a stay-at-home mom since before our first son was born. She finished college while she was pregnant and home with our first son for like the first 6 months, 2 years. She was home with him. She finished her degree and then was going to go back to work. And then she got pregnant again, right? And by that point in time, I was starting to do well. And by the time we had our second kid, we were like, well, we don't need you to go, start an entry-level job and then have someone else raise our young children for 8 to 10 hours a day.
Right.
You stay home with the kids. So for the past 10 years, it's been her at home, either pregnant or with our children, and me working. And that's worked out really, really well. But then you go to doing really well to having nothing, right? And that sense of security that women need, and all that rug all of a sudden gets pulled out, or tablecloth, whatever, from underneath them. It can shake things up at home, right? And then I can't blame her for this. She's a woman, very emotional being, and usually very supportive. But in those times of adversity, she's questioning me as a man and my ability to provide and support. And how could you be so stupid? And you didn't listen to me when I told you to clean up your language this time and that time. And these things that are just like, it's kind of like taking that hot iron and digging it in deeper, taking that knife and digging it in deeper, like, rubbing your face in the mud. It's like, I know I screwed up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But I'm going to turn this around. So there was some conflict at home because of that, but it was not healthy conflict, but it's kind of a derivative of the situation where I can't change how she feels. I can't change the past, but I can let her know and reassure her that everything's going to be okay. Here's the situation. We got money to cover bills. I have the experience, and this is the opportunity that God is presenting us right now. And so for the most part, she's been very supportive, with times combined with some of that uncertainty or feelings of security. She can get shaken up a little bit, but she's a strong woman. She is, she's very loyal. She's very hardworking, and she just needs that sense of security that women need.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And I love her to death.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, I mean, she had been comfortable knowing that what you were doing was working, and I'm guessing even the way you've described your income, I'm sure a lot of it was performance driven. So the checks would range, right? And so there was always some level of ups and downs, but it was high highs and low lows weren't really, it was more like, blips. And so the income would be consistent, but it'd be pretty strong, consistent, right?
We always live within our means, right? We have a modest house. We never, as my income was growing or as we were doing really well, it wasn't like, let's go more into debt because we can afford a bigger house. What
was your best year?
Income wise,
yeah.
Right around 400.
Yeah, right?
Around 400.
And it's not like you're going out and spending on a $1 million home, right?
No, dude. We bought our house in 2015, 2016 for $249.
Yeah,
we refied a couple times down into, we're in a 15-year at a 2.49 interest rate. Yeah. We owe $160K on our house that is worth, I don't know, probably between $400 and $500 right now. And any of those wants, even like along back in 2018, we had some vehicle issues. I want the most reliable vehicle I could possibly get for my wife and children. We bought a Toyota 4Runner, brand new. Paid it off within 6 months. That was the last debt we had beside our mortgage. The last debt or payment we had was in 2018. So any of those wants in life, we just paid cash for, right? I got really into Dave Ramsey early on. You know what I mean? Yeah. We didn't do Financial Peace University, but
the principles, right?
The principles, and you think about the borrower being slave to the lender, and you look at all these young couples. You get out of college, you get a big boy job, and all of a sudden it's like you're broke from your student loans and car payments and house payments, and that's not the life we wanted to live, right? So we spent willingly on those wants and providing a good life, but it was always within our means, and it was we made that capable because we weren't house broke, because we didn't need at that time a brand new truck would have been 60 or 70,000, 80,000. Now it's like 100 some thousand. If you were to go buy a brand new Escalade, you'd be looking at six figures. Nowadays, ridiculous. In 2018, a brand new Escalade was like 75,000. And it's amazing how prices go. But going back to what you said, we always live within our means, and that's part of kind of what set me up for being able to do what I'm doing here.
This season, having that bridge, right?
Yeah.
But here's what's cool, man. Like to take what okay, so you have industry knowledge, that's yours. You have the ability to build relationships, that's yours, right? And so if you think back, and I think this is what I encourage for many men. Now, maybe the order of operations would change if I were to, suggest a future for anyone that's trying to do their own thing before they have to figure it out, right? Because you have always a little bit of runway. But in your case, what I love about what you decided to do, and it wasn't much of a pivot, because for you to take that knowledge and skill, the industry and the ability to communicate proficiently with people, you just needed to find partners on the back end that can deliver, right? And so you can still live in a way that's, who's the customer? Let me find the customer. Let me convince them of the value proposition. Let me show them the strengths of follow-up and good customer service, right? Those things translate. And so my biggest excitement is when I meet guys that are like in that position where they've been comfortable for too long. They've settled with, at one season I was challenged and I love it, and the thrill was going to get it. But then the culture, they're a victim of not only the big income they've made, but then the culture is keeping them there, free coffee and this and that and the other thing, and foosball, the benefits, this and that. But then the next layer is, the direction and the vision. And when you start to see directions of organizations change and you don't have the influence maybe that you want, or really feel compelled to continue to stay all in, it creates doubt, right? And so now you're saying, oh man, you were kind of already starting to get there, and probably why this door that opened allowed you to be open to seeing what that had for you. And I think the opportunity for all of us is, what are we most gifted in? What are we passionate about? And we don't have to work for someone to do those things. Now, the hard part is transitioning from income to no income. And that's what everyone fears, especially our spouses, because it's been such a normal baseline. But it takes the risk. The risk is absolutely there, right? But the reward is far greater than we can imagine. And I think, shifting gears a little bit, isn't that Jesus? I think sometimes we realize that we know about this man who was perfect, who taught us how to live. And the little things that we do, the locker room talk that can capture a small sin, right, gets us off track to a point where we're punished by that, to wake up to the reality that that's because the way we live, right, is so important. In 1 Peter, be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have. But in the flip side of this, right, if you squeeze Crest toothpaste on your toothbrush and ketchup comes out, right? I'm a Christian, and Crest, I'm expecting Crest, and ketchup comes out, I think you're going to be a little shocked that the wrong thing came out of your mouth, right? And so if you're in manufacturing and you're making Crest and you realize you got the wrong ingredient inside, you got to do a whole lot of analysis to figure out where the heck that went wrong, right? And so a professing believer, myself, I do this. The F-bombs that get dropped, or the tone of voice that I use with my children, right? Or my wife when she just doesn't understand when I'm trying to communicate that I want to be close with her and I'm doing this for the family. And, it's hard because we all tell ourselves these stories, and until we're tested and we fail, and then we have a consequence for the failure, is when we get on our knees and say, God, show me what, Jesus, I need you. And I think putting all of our faith in him, this is the complete testament to that. Because now you're building a business on faith and hope and trust that he has you now, and you went through this journey for a reason. Imagine telling your wife, some of the darkest, deepest sins you've committed to her, like I had to, and having to start over with your marriage. It takes work. It's a grind, right? And it's never going to be the same until forgiveness and the possibility to redeem yourself. Well, he's done that for us. So let's talk about that a little bit. Your redemption story, is not only one of building the business, right? Redemptiveness in leaving something and going to undo it and revive it, but in your heart, what in your mind in that season do you believe the Lord was showing you about your faith journey and about who you are and the lesson you learn to pivot, right? To say, I'm dead to that sin, even though we all continue to fail, right? We all fall short. But talk about your heart and your mind went through that season while you're now trying to build this business, right? You're like having to deal with the consequence, but knowing that for that consequence to catch up to you again, it's pretty few and far between potentially, but because you know better. But what did it really cause you to do inside?
It's that active repentance when you're a Christian man, when you have a relationship from God, you recognize your sin. God created us in that way to know what is right in our hearts, and we know when we're sinning, and when the words that come out of your mouth are a reflection of what's in your heart, and it involves active repentance, right? It's like men who are addicted to pornography. They know that it just takes something small for that shrub to start to grow again, right? Before they know it, they're looking at porn again, right? And what happens is I'm much better now at looking at things from a perspective of how can I be a better listener here? How can it's like in Ephesians, do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only what is necessary for building others up so that it may benefit those who listen. And then in Proverbs, it talks about how damaging our words can be, and the shrewdness of the tongue, right? And the wickedness, that just the ability that we have to do damage with our words. And this ugliness still rears itself in, sometimes in conflict with my wife and things like that, even though, that sort of comes off in a way that is, okay, I have to defend myself because I feel like I'm under attack, right? But it's two parts of the same thing when you talk about Jesus and how he was able to handle conflict with his words. It's something that I'm still working on, right? But the ability to just clean up your language and be a reflection of God when you talk, and to pour into other people and not gossip, right? It's this thing that you're actively working on. Going to that analogy, right? Like a man that's addicted to pornography, it's like you can't open up your heart. You can't even open up your heart to it, right? You have to rethink and reform yourself as a man to see things from a new perspective, and it allows you to change yourself in a way to where that sin no longer has a root in your heart, and that's the thing that I'm actively working towards right now. It's like in more and more circumstances, I'm able to stop, think, and then talk, and choose my words carefully, and be calculated with my speech in a way that blesses others or is just purely informational or something like that, versus like the locker room talk or trying to be cool or just needing to hear yourself talk, right? And I think that's one of those formational changes that this event has had on me as a man and my growth as a Christian is being able to stop, listen, think before you speak.
Yeah.
Where before it was like I was always trying to be the funny guy. But guess what? God must have a sense of humor because he created us with a sense of humor. You know what I mean? And there's ways to be funny without John Christ. He's a comedian, a Christian comedian. I think the guy's hilarious, right? He's clean comedy. And he's hilarious. There's ways to be funny and make people laugh and be that light in people's lives, which I've always liked to be positive, upbeat, generous, like just be the funny guy. I can be a good Christian man and still a sinner, right? I'm not that self-righteous type where it's like, yeah, I can be a good person. No, I mean, we're all sinners, right? God knows our hearts, but the person I want to be more like Jesus, you can make people laugh in a way that is not sinful and rude or dirty locker room talk.
Right. Well, and I think it's a perspective you mentioned. And I think part of that perspective is, the remorse. And look at anyone in the history of the wrong things that put people in prison, right? Let's not necessarily talk about, but in the case of murder, right? A lot of times like, oh man, whatever happened, they are now spending life, if not most of it, right, in that situation. Of course, they lost. It cost them everything for doing that, right? But then, in the circumstances of manslaughter, the accident or the death that happens, you're still responsible for what you did. But if you weren't responsible for it, what would happen? I don't know how change could happen, because here's the reality. Like, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, Romans 3:23, but then Romans 6:23, it says, for the wages, right? The cost of sin is death. And but the gift of God is eternal life. The cost of sin, if we know that, it's head knowledge. But until there's a consequence, death is the consequence. No, death actually, sin gets in the way of our lives right now. It causes us to stumble, right? And until we're having to deal with the consequence, like I did, is when we have to pick it back up. It's when it becomes the hard work. And so, the sense of humor thing that God has, it's sometimes the thing that we most struggle with is the thing we have to, learn to get through to the other side and to be the version he wants us to be. For me, that's anger. For me, that was my getting out of the way of making work in business the biggest priority in my life, because it took over everything. And I couldn't see it until I screwed up, right? And so it's like, well, what's so wrong with pornography? Well, it's a small foothold, right? It's a small piece of lust that captures our eye, and now it becomes the thing our eyes follow, and allows us to deceive ourselves. And what's another look, or what's looking at that video going to do? Until we get caught. But then we get caught, what do we say? Well, I'm just a man, and then we justify it. And it's hard. It's the repeat cycle, right? So to your point, diving back into to be conscientious about what comes out of your heart, what have you had to do differently to kind of reprogram, the language you would use in this circumstance, but no longer use that language because of, reprocessing? Like, boom, that could come out, swearing like a sailor. If you hang out with a bunch of sailors, you're going to swear like one. So what have you did the change to get to that progression? Just curious.
I like that you said get to that progression, because we're never really there.
It's never,
right?
it's never this,
it's not perfect.
right?
It's
a
not.
gradual.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm still a young man.
Oh, dude.
And I think that there's two pieces, but the one is knowing God in a closer and more meaningful way, which involves reading and digesting his word.
Relationship, right?
The answers, the Bible has the answers to life in it.
It's the book of life, right?
It's the book of life, and you can't spend enough time there. I don't spend enough time there. I spend more time than I used to, but still not enough. And that's by far the number one thing, because
So you changed your reading habits?
it's repetitive. Yeah, just getting into God's word more often, more prayer, more just confessing that, God, I can't do this alone.
Yeah,
I
right.
need you, and learning to become a better listener, seeking to understand people better, and just sometimes even being a fly on the wall.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, if somebody's being blasphemous, I'm that type of guy. I'll jump out and I'll be quick to defend God and defend my faith. But it's not like I don't always need to hear myself talk or need to be the funny guy or the center of attention in the room. It's just reminding myself constantly, like, it's okay to just sit and listen, So I named two things there, right? God's word,
Yep.
more of it. Because the more consistently you consume that, the better equipped you are to handle anything that life has to throw at you, and to deal with your own sin that you're trying to work on actively repenting from, right? And the other piece of that, which I've longed for so long in my life, right, is being in relationship with other strong Christian men, right? So we have some neighbors, and they go to church and whatever, but it's like I like guys that I can meet up with. Like Hans, our friend, he's one of them, and I have a few others in life, and you're becoming one of those men where it's like, dude, God is like, he is the top of the pyramid. He is the focal point of that relationship, and the reason for which that relationship flourishes. And without him present, it's meaningless. It really is meaningless. And I've prayed on this, and I've searched for this, not actively enough, but something about the timing of all of this is just incredible and divine.
100%.
That God is putting me in positions to connect with other men who have the same beliefs, who are willing to, it's iron sharpening iron, man.
Yeah.
One of your favorite scriptures. And that's more of what I need. Good men to help hold me accountable to it, not just to God, to being a Christian man, I'm not accountable to you or to myself, but it's like accountable to God. And that means everything, right? That means being on time, right? Still fall short of that sometimes. Cleaning up your language, repenting from whatever sin you're struggling with, but then actively trying to fill your purpose and what God wants for you in this life.
Well, in that alone, I mean, that alone is a mystery sometimes, right? And like we talk about this progression, to doing your own thing and knowing Jesus, and then knowing Jesus through this period of time, you having to exit a job, a career because of something that happened, and you're going, oh, what are you teaching me here, right? And then sort of through that journey, you're reflecting on that. But and sometimes too, it's like the little things that are coming into our brain, like what are we watching, what are we listening to, and who are we around, impact the way we speak, impact the way we talk, the rhetoric we use in the office or not in the office with the guys we hang out with, right? And it's like I've looked back, and I've like, I'm a different person, because there was a season of jokes. That's all I could, come up with. How be as raunchy as possible, and that would make people laugh because it would be, awkwardly true, and whatever circumstance it was, I wanted to be the funny guy too. But like, when we die to sin, we die to self, and we're a new creation. So like, no longer do I want to, like the desire is gone.
And you find it's interesting because you find yourself like you fall back into that sin or whatever. You say something stupid, and you feel instead of feeling like a sense of pride, like you made people laugh or whatever, now it's like you reflect back on that, and it's kind of this disgust, like,
this
man,
guilt and
shame.
shame.
I really didn't need to do that, But I think a greater purpose that comes from all this is you take your personal development, but then you begin to put yourself out in the world as a better man, a better reflection of God, and that leads into how you conduct yourself and
Yes.
and who you serve and how your business operates, and it becomes infectious, right? In Matthew it says, "Let your light so shine on men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father in heaven." And that's what I'm striving for, where I want to be this positive energy so much that people see God in me and God working through me, and so much so that they want some of that, right? Not me, not myself. Take me out of it, right? They want God that's coming through me, and that energy that He created us to project into this world upon other people. That is what I'm striving for, right? But it's so hard with pride. That's the root of all sin. It's so hard to remove yourself and your ego from that. I don't know if it's possible until we are recreated new in our new bodies and serving and in a perfect world. With when Jesus comes back, I don't know whether that's possible in the current broken world that we live in. Maybe it is. I'm not wise enough to know at this point in my life, and I'm not ashamed to admit that. But I know that I can strive to be that, and I know I'm capable of achieving, not necessarily achieving, but being to that point in my personal development where I can have that godly, affectious energy, but removing yourself and your ego and your pride 100% from that, I don't know if that's possible.
Well, I think there's opportunities we can be righteous, right? And certainly they don't last very long before, a righteous person still sins 7 times a day. I was reading some scripture about this. I'm like, even a righteous person, right? A person who does right and still is going to struggle 7 times. It's like, I think some people even may not even recognize the possibility of what 7 sins looks like, because the definition is so moved over to our cultural's version, right? Our cultural's version is, what's wrong is something you're imprisoned for. And what I mean by sin in the definition of the Bible is something you've done wrong, you've thought wrong, you've failed to do for God or for others, right? Something you've done, thought, or failed to do. If you know what's right and don't do it for someone else even, that's sin. And it's like, okay, so I'm too busy, and it's like the example of the Good Samaritan, right? Even the guy driving down the road looks over and sees a guy on the side of the road stuck in a situation, and what do we say? We're too busy, we got to get to work. And it's like that happens all day, And so for us, like to your point, having a relationship with God, it's like that accountability we have with men. If we're not able to stop and seek and hear God's voice and have Him point us to the light and what's right and correct it with Him, fortunately, the other option and the good news is we have godly men in our lives that, to your point about accountability, are there to do it lovingly. Matthew talks about if one of your brothers sins, bring it to him. And if he doesn't listen, if he still doesn't listen, bring it to him again. And if still doesn't listen, bring it to the church. And if he still doesn't listen, keep repeating it. And it's like, we're here to support each other and help each other through that. So I think the morning as you walked in, we talked about, being embarrassed because of being late. And like, I hit my snooze and I was 2 hours behind the normal schedule today, right? And the reality is, like, I came out of a pretty hot, long weekend of frustrations and challenges with my own wife in my own marriage. And as we were just talking back and forth, like, it's so easy as we're trying to juggle the balls of right now having to provide and right now having to say the right things to our spouse and do the right things, but then having to go provide and find business and work really hard and double down on that and, all these different responsibilities. And then those are the reasons we say we sin, because this was happening and I was irritated. And when I catch my daughter, it's almost the first word out of her mouth every time is he. She's pointing to her brother and says he.
Yeah.
I said, the first words out of your mouth is not he. It's not someone else's fault, because there's something that you did. We have to own it. And so when we live our life that way, I say this to so many guys, like, I want to be called out because I didn't used to. I used to hide from that. I used to hide from that guy. I used to hide from the guys like, oh, I don't want to be made. I hope they didn't, and then it would be like shame if I did. I'm like, oh gosh,
It goes back to Adam in the garden trying to hide from God.
100%, right? And so the serpent, whether it's literal or not, the reality is Bema podcast, speaking of that, if you've made it to this part where he goes, was there a physical snake talking, or was it just the human sinful nature that said, this woman you put me here with, right? And so first thing he does is blame her, right? And she, first thing she does is blame the snake. Well, this is deception. And it's, did he really say that as in this loving God the Father? Did he really, put all this beauty here to not let you enjoy it? Like, did he really say that? And like, even that is our tendency to go, yeah, did he? To even question him, right? And then what does Adam do in that story? He actually, part of it is he saves face by justifying. So first he defends it and says, the woman you put me here with. But he also joins her because she screwed up. And so rather than him saying no and not knowing what's going to happen to Eve if he chooses to do the right thing, he sticks with his wife and chooses to partake because he's responsible for his own self. And he took it and said, the woman you put me here. That's his reason. It wasn't, I knew it was wrong, but I did it anyway. He joined her in the sin probably because of love. And so it's an interesting dynamic here, right? That we're forced to always be thinking. And that's why if we slow down and we're present right here, it almost becomes impossible if our reality is constantly sharpening, right? It's hard to go dull. And so the importance of being with believers and doing business in a kingdom way, and why it impacts all of our life, why I'm so passionate about every inch of the man,
I was thinking height when you said it.
Yeah, so good, because that could
stick
be
with that,
Yeah, in some ways, inch or inches.
Feet.
Yeah. The man can go down that in a second, right? And so the whole, God wants all of us, the good, the bad, and the ugly, but the ugly needs to be surrendered to get all of us. Dude,
it's amazing though how quickly that ugly pops up. But it's also healthy to understand where it comes from. And I'm not saying it's okay to be okay with it.
Right.
But
it's more important to know where it comes from.
But it's impossible without walking with God.
Yes.
Because without him, it's pride. I can do it myself. Yep. I got this.
I don't need to rely on him.
Self-help, or you're blaming others. It's not your fault, and you get no progression, no improvement. You insulate yourself from God and what he wants from you and what you're called to be when you do that.
And crazy thing is, the first sin of all time, they hide because they're shamed. And of all things, are they punished for that sin? No. The God of the creation of the universe and us meets them and comforts them. He meets them and comforts them after this. So I had a crazy situation this weekend. My 6th grader going on 7th grade, we just long ride up to the lake on Friday night. Was very, very annoyed, probably needed to eat some food.
The kid or you?
He was, my kid. Started to be lippy to mom a little bit, almost told her no, and then he said, shut up. And I called him out. And the thing is, they get away with this stuff. They they can say it to their brothers. If no one says it, it can become a culture. And so culture is what you allow it to happen. Culture, and that's why in your case, culture, if they would have set a precedent, right, by allowing something to happen. So they create a culture of, we don't do that, right? And in my case, allowing my kid to say shut up to my wife in front of everyone, I've drawn the line. So I'm beginning to draw the line more and more frequently. And I told him, you will not speak to her that way. This is your mother, your one and only, the one and only person who will do whatever it takes for you. And the other person right here will do whatever he has to do to protect that. And and will do whatever he has to do to make sure you live, but you will never speak to her that way, right? You need to go to your room. Well, then it turned into a crazy blow up. And I chased him up the door or upstairs because I knew what was going to go happen. He was going to go sit in his shame and his guilt and his sadness and also anger. And I said, we got to break this. We got to break this cycle, because then eventually he would have come out. He would have had that repressed feeling. So you know what I did? I chased after him. And normally I know better, because this son wants to be alone and needs to process it alone. But at that moment, I went up to him and I'm just like, dude, I got on my knees. I was trying everything I could to just get him to calm down. He was screaming, get away from me. He just didn't want to, he wanted to be alone. He wanted to process. But I knew that correction needed to come from me. But I also know, I was like, I tried to follow in this Genesis example. I just wanted to be his father and show him, dude, I love you. There's nothing you can do to ever change that. Let me give you a hug and let me just talk with you. Let me just help you go through this. And he wouldn't let me touch him. Don't touch me, like scared. And I got down on my knees and I just started praying. And I literally started crying, because my own son had been not even comfortable with me giving me a hug. And he's really a lack of touchy type of kid, like doesn't want it. And I just felt compelled. And I'm like, he needs to see the Father's love. That the son just wants to please the Father. And in this case, the Father has unconditional love. And he just wants to put his arm around his son and say, you are my son who I'm well pleased. And I said, despite what had just happened, I said, I will love you no matter what. And I did everything I could to give every positive ounce of what I had in me. And I went down this path of bawling. And I said, dude, I just need you to hug me. And eventually what I said with him got him to break. And I said, I failed. I failed that we can't even have a relationship like this. And so that moment, if I was busy, if I had something to do, if I had my agenda, because on the way up to the lake, it's like anything can happen. 5 kids are going to want to do 5 different things. And, if I do my own thing, that means kids are down at the dock that shouldn't be, little kids, right? All the stuff that my wife would have to clean up, and just Josh does his thing, selfish. I said, no, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be tentative. I'm going to tend to everything going on. That was my attitude in my heart this time, and game changer. And he came back out, we hugged, we reconciled, and it was a spark of a new beginning. And so when we face these challenges, the only way through it is love, only way through it. And having the ability to stop and recognize it, but then if you can't, having a self mechanism to go back and be able to reconcile after the fact, even to get to the root of it. Still working through that, because this has been a journey, but he's told himself so many things about himself that aren't true, that has continued to affect his self-esteem. So I say all that because the power of sin ends up affecting what we tell ourselves, what our wives tell themselves about us, what our wives think based on the stories they tell themselves about our ability to provide or not provide, or, in the conversation we had again this morning about the opposites we're dealing with. Like, you wanted to be home and be more supportive, and she's worried about the money. And the flip side is my wife wants me all in here and not to be worried about the business stuff and going after the money. And it's because the stories we've told ourselves. And so it's all baked in sin.
Sometimes you're feeding yourself mixed signals. They're not external.
It's 100% true.
But you're also, this morning we were talking about how love is the answer, and you can discipline and correct your children. Well, that it should only come out of love for them.
Yes,
but
not anger.
The way that it manifests itself is where we have to actively work on controlling. Because our children, that expression of anger that comes out of them. Sometimes you bear that as a parent. Oh, they're a reflection of us and our lack of ability to control our own anger.
Right.
Which to some extent it's true, but to another extent that's that's kind of how we're designed, right?
Yes.
That anger and that frustration is a result of one. I mean, one, it's not inherently sinful to be angry or frustrated, right? But
just do not sin in your anger.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you can't always bear that weight as a parent that you screwed up so bad that your child can't. They're just, as children can't regulate their emotions, and anger is a normal human emotion, right? And how it manifests itself is sometimes a reflection of your lack of self-control, and other times it's just them learning. They know words. They're just expressing it and unleashing it in a way, and it's not, in that moment. It's hard because I would have done the same thing as a dad, just wanted to really come down on the child. But I've done the same thing where it's like you choose to do things different. And when you express love, you can still have that conversation with the child about what they said being wrong. But that harsh discipline in that moment, I think it can sometimes be destructive to the child because they're not understanding the root of it. You know what I mean?
That behind that, what actually they did, the sin, right? But as opposed to how they've been treated now and punished, they're misinterpreting that as, he doesn't love me, I'm not accepted, I'm not acceptable, he's disappointed with me, right? And it's like, oh my gosh, even that is a story we told ourselves. And so it happens. And the more we can be aware and regulate, like even today we were talking about action, right? In James 2, faith without works, faith without deeds is dead, that even the demons believe there's a God. So like just knowing there's a God, believing there's a God doesn't cut it, because we need to live a certain way. And so this morning, even in my devotions, like sometimes the kids just don't understand that, if we're going to make this claim to Jesus as a savior, but then go out the door and live a different way, and we just got baptized professing in front of everyone, I'm a different person. Like, these are the perspectives and the conversations now at teenagers I'm having. Like, you just can't go get baptized and make that decision. I'm glad you did at 13, son. But then when you go choose to live a certain way and your friends know that you go to church, they don't think you're any different when you participate in this or that, right? Because you just told them. And that means you're different, and you're different because. And it's just I'm so blessed to be able to have the problems and the challenges and the sins that I've had personally, and the consequences of those sins to learn. It's the best part. To be a coach comes with, don't do that. Don't run the play that way, because it's not going to work out for you. Like, getting into that mindset as opposed to this dictator who just says, do it. Like, the player's going to understand when he screws up, but when the coach just yells at him, but the coach explains why it's a bad idea, where that problem has a conflict in that play. And that's why there was an interception or it was picked or whatever. It's like, oh, the player goes, all of a sudden, they didn't have to learn the consequence. So hopefully those are the teachable moments we get. And that's where being at home, and I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure you've probably loved the time being home, to be able to just be intimate with your children in a way that's not, a typical way. It's such a blessing. But then you're faced with the dichotomy of, well, I better get my butt to work because I have to provide. Eventually money runs out, right?
Oh, yeah.
So where's your state of heart today? Just trying to go, you know what? I'm going to honor who God has made me to be, to go out and provide for my family. He's called me to love God, love others, and make disciples. So I'm going to be, faithful in that and grow in that. And I want to honor my wife and love her like Christ loved the church. And I want to, want my kids to honor me, but I'm going to teach them in the way that they should go. Right? All these things. What is the pendulum swing right now in terms of like, where you feel inadequate / you got to pick up one end, but don't want it to cost, something on the other.
Isn't that the great question for all of us, is how to properly balance that time?
They're interdependent. They're connected, right? They are all connected.
Yeah, they are. This business I started is something that I have to, have to focus on in a way that's meaningful. And by meaningful, I mean like I have to reestablish that pipeline and that security that we need so that I can I don't like the word comfortably. I don't like that word. I'm trying to think of a replacement for it, but confident is a better word. Go out and into the world and do more of God's work, serve more of God's purpose, and then integrating those two. Like, I don't want to keep my business and keep my, what God has called me to do separate, right? That's part of the reason I have trying to establish a foundation of my business,
on biblical principles,
using your talents to serve others, for the benefit of others, right? I mean, that's what God is calling me to do, and that's what I'm actively trying to do, right? But there is this piece of it that I'm grappling with, and it's like, it's recreating that stream of income, that I had before, so that we don't have to sell our house or something like that. It's like that's the paradigm I'm grappling with, but I understand that these two things don't have to be separate from one another. And that's a beautiful thing about being a new business owner is I can keep God central to my place of business. I can honor him in how I do business and how I conduct myself. And then when the business is starting to bear a lot of fruit, I can use that income to bless others and, in a way that is honoring to God. And it just kind of completely changes things for the better.
100%, man.
And
the stewardpreneur, that's it, bro.
Yeah, exactly. So, and like I said, 3 out of 4 days or 4 out of 5, my wife is very supportive, and I have to cling to that, which is what I've always been good at. She sometimes, her and I we're different in the sense that she clings to the scarcity and sometimes the negative, right? And I have had to change the way I perceive her feedback and her way of thinking to be something that's complementary to me and the way I conduct myself, not something that is in conflict or adversarial. That's very difficult for me to do, where she's always looking at something like from the negative standpoint, and I'm trying to look at the positive, and I think that God has a purpose there. There's a greater meaning and purpose behind that, and being able to work through that and see that as a blessing is not always easy, but she does have a really good perspective on some things, and I need to be able to slow down and really be a good listener. Like I said before, not just make decisions independently. We're a family, we're a couple, we're two become one in God's name, and our money is God's money. We're just stewarding it, and I really have to, as the spiritual leader of our home, be able to be in tune with her feedback and what she wants, even if it comes across as adversarial. There's something deeper there, and being able to separate yourself, taking the pride out of it. It's so hard when you feel attacked. It is so hard to remove yourself, your ego, your pride from that situation and try to understand the feelings behind it, right? Like, I'm still learning that after this September will be 9 years of marriage. And sure, we've gotten better at some things, but in some ways there hasn't been improvement, right? And I think understanding the source and the root of her feelings and her emotions, it's something that I need to be very intentional about. Otherwise, it's so easy to let your pride and that wall of defense just spring up anytime there's conflict, right? You want to defend yourself. And I've gotten better at, like I said, being a good listener, trying to really understand things before I open my mouth again and speak again, right? So
those walls, man, they get built, and they get built on, and they get built on, and they keep growing. And it's like, the bottom line is, there's often 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 more layers below the symptom, right? So the word that comes out that we don't like it's not always that. It's the tone behind it, or maybe the implication we think, right? And then whether or not that's actually true, we view that entire question not as what the surface level would be. We put ourselves in this situation of trying to guess the intent, and then we take it personally, and then we defend it, right? And it's like, well, no one's right in that situation. Both are wrong because there's a spirit of resentment that's buried underneath that because of something that's happened in the past that hasn't been reconciled. And so the more I learn, the more I draw closer to Jesus about removing these layers and these scales to get down to the heart of, like you said, behind those words, something was from the heart, that spirit of. And so the harsh word turns away anger, but a gentle answer, a harsh word stirs up anger, but a gentle answer turns away wrath, right? And like if our response is a gentle answer in love, like it'll diffuse it. And so it's almost like if you insult me, the only thing I can say would say, yeah, I'm not sure why calling me a name, or saying that to me would be helpful. Like that's, and now it's like, I don't like when you talk like that. I'm like, I am trying to lower my inside feelings right now by talking like this. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to explain to you that I don't appreciate, I can't help if I'm being called something, but I'll discount that. But it was in the tone that you used that implied this. Did I hear that correctly? Do you believe that I'd never do what I say? No, I shouldn't use the word always and never. Okay, let's remove that one, right? And so it's like, so fortunately, I shared this with you before, but my wife was queen of always and never. And through counseling, which she wouldn't have never have done unless I hadn't gone through the infidelity counseling stuff with her, I saw the other day on her wall is just some notes and some things cut out and says, words no longer in my vocabulary, always, never, and a couple of other ones. Like she's consciously, because I don't know, 600-700 times of that word, eventually maybe came to her own conclusion. It's like, thank you, Lord. Like always and never. At least she catches herself now, because I know I screw up. I don't need to be told it's always, right?
Yeah, because that's not who you are, right?
It's not who I am. It's not true. And you're giving this example and you're exploiting it, right? Like, I didn't mean that for that to happen. And often it's that one. I hear what you're saying. You're right. I actually didn't mean it like that. It did come out wrong. It actually came out like a jerk. I'm going to own that.
But it's amazing how even marriage is one thing, but with any relationship, how easy it is to diffuse conflict, whether it's an angry customer or a friend or just somebody who's road raging with being like, dude, I'm sorry.
I didn't mean to cut you off.
That was my mistake. Like you're right. I didn't mean it like that. I'm sorry, man.
Boom.
How can I help? How can we de-escalate this? And it's amazing that unless people are so mentally defective that they can't understand, they can't remove their own pride from the situation.
Yes.
9 out of 10 people, it's like you completely diffuse their anger.
Yes. And to your point right there, it's being willing to truly own it. But before that, even too, I've learned that just simply acknowledging, and not just by saying, oh, I can understand how you feel. That's a good one, right? I can appreciate where you're coming from there. I never thought of it that way. But then saying another set of words that actually shows how you might be truly understanding, right? So, man, I never thought of it that way before. I guess if that were me and this happened to me, I guess I would be pretty upset too. Now the natural response is, it's always an excuse. It doesn't matter, what it is. It's an excuse the way you act. I'm like, instead, I can see how that would get you mad. And so now you're like empathizing with them. You're repeating back to them.
Affirming.
Affirming.
Affirming your partner's feelings or somebody who's just kind of caught up in that anger is so diffusing. Like people need to use that principle more often.
Isn't that communication?
More often. It's like it is, yeah.
But we're reminded in Scripture, we have to go to Scripture to get to shake it out of someone. Why? Because it's exposed through the sin. Mm-hmm. And it's like, oh, that makes sense why we have a Bible that's really the life and the light into our feet and the lamp unto our path. It is the right and wrong. It is the model we should follow. But we have to get through all of the crap to get to the heart of it. Isn't it true? I mean, selfishness, and that's it. It is the root. Sin is the root. What is it?
Pride is the root of all sin.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Looking at yourself and thinking that you have all the answers, or it's not my fault. You could look at most, it's amazing. Like, I feel like 90% or more of all the sin we see in the world is just it's a pride issue.
Well, then that next layer,
I can do it myself.
That next layer, so pride sets in, but then it's for the love of money, right, is the root of all evil. And so the evilness and wickedness comes from this selfishness to obtain, power, and they can obtain power through money, and using that money then as a tool to fuel their selfishness, right? And so that's where it's like, whew.
But every civilization in history that's risen and fallen, it's because of the people that try to replace God with their own selfish motives and agenda every single time, right? And you look at what's happening in society right now. It's this build up towards we can do this without God, and things they're not sustainable like that.
Yeah.
Nothing is sustainable.
Yeah.
God's kingdom is the only thing that's sustainable. His word, his existence is the only thing there ever was and ever has been. And luckily for us, thankfully for us, glory to God that he has created and opened up this kingdom that we have been gracefully granted access to through him. Like, how amazing is that? And I understand it's this life and these bodies and these emotions are so hard to deal with on a daily basis. But when you can truly stay focused as much as possible, 'cause it's hard, right? On serving God, like it's such a beautiful thing. It really changes you fundamentally in how you see things. And I think being able to, one, own your words and your behavior, and two, treat others as you would like to be treated, the fruit that just those principles alone can bear is unlimited.
100%. Yeah, it reminded me of that song, Build Your Kingdom Here. Like, if we can get to that place, right, every day, and it's hard, but when you're in an environment where there's that kind of love, life is enjoying. It's so fun. Like, think about the times on vacation, right, when you're with your family and people are getting along and the right things are happening. It's just a thrill, right? But then you come back and you get back to the normal and the routines, and we go back to the same old stuff. And so getting out of the house and doing in another environment helps, right, when we're maybe more vulnerable, and able to remove ourselves. But life is so hard, and the brain is so powerful, and it's also very deceiving, and underneath that is guard your heart, because above all else, everything we do flows from it. And if that heart is deceived, that's where wickedness can settle in. So, at the end of the day, man, you showing up today and just being real about that transition, that timing, and having to own your own thing, that's huge in itself. And more excitingly for me is I get to see a guy kind of recreate something now that is in his best interest, not only for his family, but in his wiring to because I know what's going to come out of that is a massive responsibility to steward wealth, because you've done it. But now when you have unlimited upside, because if you make 400 grand, what kind of money's flowing to a company, a whole lot more money than your percentage of it. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the reality is it's out there. It's out there for all of us. And I believe truly that God wants us to be free, not only in him, but from these chains of corporate, and again, not in a bad way, but in a way of that the handcuffs keep us from becoming the version he wants us to be. And we're so scared to move out into that world. And I think it comes from fear. I think it comes from doubt. I think it comes from not being good enough, or being told you're not good enough, or whatever, right? And it's the enemy. Now, not everyone is wired for that, I will also argue, because it takes a different person to get up every time you get knocked down. And that's why boxers are boxers and I am not.
Yep.
So Kyle Miller, man, what a journey we've been on. I hate to wind it down now. We could keep rolling, but we went deep. We went wide, mostly deep.
Yeah, let's swing back onto this platform in another 6 to 12 months and talk more about how God is working in our lives and how
I'd love to have you back.
we've used our vehicles to bless others. And I'm really excited for the work that you're doing to serve God and taking the kingdom factor principles and letting those flow through the Stewardpreneur vision that you have. I love it, and I want to serve within it at whatever capacity that I can, So
Starts right here
You
for
got a
being-
brother in Christ here.
Amen.
If there's anything you ever need, just I'm one of those people you can keep on speed dial to at least reach out and ask for help, and if I'm available, I'll be there.
That's what it's all about, man. That's what it's all about. Well, thanks for tuning in for another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful here in St. Michael with my guy, Kyle Miller. Thanks. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.